March 27, 2026. 5:41 a.m., Western Zaporizhia Oblast. A single F-16 AM skims the frozen steppe at 200 feet, engines screaming, terrain masking every second of the approach. The pilot, call sign unknown unit classified, has been flying below radar coverage for 11 minutes. His radar warning receiver is alive, pulsing. The signal he's hunting is close. An S-400 Triumph, Russia's most advanced operational air defense system. A weapon Moscow has spent 2 decades marketing as impenetrable, a system worth over $500 million per battalion, a system that, for the past 4 months, has turned the skies above southern Zaporizhia into a graveyard for anything that flies above 50 meters. In 19 seconds, that system will cease to exist. I'm your host at Ukraine Signal, where we analyze the battles that change wars. And this battle, this single engagement lasting less than half a minute of active combat, may have changed the air war over Ukraine permanently. Because what happened on March 27th wasn't just a missile strike, it was a proof of concept, a demonstration that the most feared air defense system in Russia's arsenal has a fatal vulnerability. One that Ukraine figured out how to exploit with patience, intelligence, and a weapon America designed 40 years ago for exactly this purpose. The AGM-88 HARM, high-speed anti-radiation missile, a weapon that doesn't track aircraft, doesn't chase heat signatures, it hunts radar emissions. It follows the electromagnetic energy that an air defense radar must broadcast to function. The very act of searching for targets becomes the targeting solution for the missile that destroys you. For the Russian S-400 crew near Robotyne, their own radar was the last thing they ever turned on. Let's break it down from the beginning. To understand what happened on March 27th, you need to understand what the southern Zaporizhia front looked like in early 2026. The ground war had settled into a pattern. Ukrainian forces held positions along a line running roughly from Orikhiv southeast toward Robotyne. Russian forces maintained defensive positions in depth, anchored by minefields, drone surveillance, and, critically, layered air defense. The centerpiece of that air defense was an S-400 Triumph battalion operating from a position approximately 35 kilometers behind the front line. Ukrainian intelligence had first detected the system in November 2025, when its 91N6 acquisition radar began appearing on signals intelligence intercepts. The 91N6 is the big picture radar, the one that scans the sky out to 600 kilometers, identifying everything that moves. It operates in the S-band, and its signature is distinctive. Ukrainian electronic intelligence units had cataloged it within 48 hours of its first activation, but the 91N6 alone doesn't shoot anything down. The weapon that matters, the component that turns the S-400 from a surveillance platform into a killing machine, is the 92N6 engagement radar. This is the fire control system. It operates in the X-band, tracks individual targets with extreme precision, and guides the 48N6 interceptor missiles to their targets at speeds exceeding Mach 6. When the 92N6 locks onto an aircraft, the pilot has seconds, sometimes less. And this particular 92N6 had been responsible for at least 3 confirmed shootdowns since December 2025. 2 Ukrainian reconnaissance drones operating at medium altitude, 1 Su-25 attack aircraft that had strayed above its safe operating ceiling during a close air support mission near Tokmak on January 14, 2026. The pilot ejected but was captured. Ukrainian Air Force Command designated this S-400 battalion as Target Karpaty. Priority maximum. The problem was reaching it. The S-400's engagement envelope extends over 250 kilometers for large targets, roughly 150 kilometers for fighter-sized aircraft at medium altitude. Any conventional strike profile, climbing to acquire the target, releasing ordnance, turning away, would place the attacking aircraft inside the S-400's lethal zone for over a minute. Against the 92N6's track-while scan capability, a minute was a death sentence. HIMARS was considered. The M31 guided rocket has a range of approximately 80 kilometers, enough to reach the S-400 position from Ukrainian-held territory. But S-400 battalions move. Russian doctrine calls for displacement every 24 to 48 hours, specifically to avoid counter-battery strikes. By the time HIMARS rockets arrived, the launchers might be gone. And HIMARS rockets don't home on radar emissions. They hit fixed coordinates. A miss by even 50 meters against a mobile system means a wasted salvo. Storm Shadow cruise missiles were another option. Range, over 250 kilometers. Terrain following flight profile, bunker-penetrating warhead. But Storm Shadow stocks in Ukraine were limited, and the missiles were being reserved for strategic targets, command posts, ammunition depots, bridges. Spending a Storm Shadow on a target that might relocate before impact was a risk Ukrainian planners weren't willing to take. Which weapon was deadlier against the S-400? A. HIMARS. B. Storm Shadow. C. AGM-88 HARM. Comment below and tell us what you think. The answer, as events proved, was C. And the reason comes down to physics. The AGM-88 HARM doesn't need pre-programmed coordinates. It doesn't need GPS. It doesn't need a satellite data link or a forward observer calling in a grid reference. It needs one thing, a radar signal. As long as the target radar is emitting, the HARM will find it. At Mach 2, from ranges exceeding 100 kilometers in some variants, the missile homes on the electromagnetic energy itself, riding the radar beam down to its source like a hawk diving on prey it can smell but not see. And the 92N6 engagement radar, by definition, must emit to function. The moment it turns on to track a target, it announces its position to every anti-radiation sensor within range. For months, Ukrainian intelligence had been building the picture. Signals intelligence operators tracked every activation of the S-400's radars. They mapped the timing. The 91N6 acquisition radar operated on a predictable cycle, powering up for 20 to 40 minutes, then shutting down for displacement or maintenance. The 92N6 was more sporadic. It activated only when the battalion commander perceived a genuine aerial threat, a drone crossing the front line, a Ukrainian aircraft climbing above terrain masking. The 92N6 would flash on, track the target, and then, if a missile was launched, remain active to guide the interceptor to impact. This pattern was the key. The 92N6 activated reactively. It needed a stimulus. Ukrainian planners realized they could create that stimulus. The plan that emerged in late February 2026 was elegant in its simplicity. 2 F-16AMs would participate, one as the shooter, one as the bait. The bait aircraft, an F-16 flying a profile designed to appear as a genuine penetration attempt, would approach the S-400's threat envelope from the northwest, climbing briefly above terrain masking at a range of approximately 120 kilometers. Just long enough for the 91N6 acquisition radar to detect it, just threatening enough for the battalion commander to authorize engagement radar activation. The moment the 92N6 powered up, the shooter, approaching from a completely different vector at ultra-low altitude, would have the targeting solution delivered by the S-400's own emissions. Pop up, lock, fire, dive, gone. Stay with me. What happens in the next 12 minutes of this story ends with the most expensive single weapon system Russia has lost in the entire war. Training began in early March. The two pilots selected for the mission had both completed advanced F-16 qualification at a European training base, specific location classified, but widely reported to be in Denmark or Romania. Both had previous combat experience in Ukrainian aircraft before transitioning to the F-16. The lead pilot, the shooter, had flown Su-27 flankers before 2025. He understood Russian air defense doctrine from the inside. He knew how S-400 operators thought because he'd trained to evade their predecessors for years. The AGM-88 HARM missiles were loaded in pre-briefed mode. This meant the missile seeker was programmed before takeoff, with the specific radar frequency and signal characteristics of the 92N6. When launched, the HARM would ignore every other emitter in the electromagnetic spectrum, jammers, communication radios, other radars, and track only the signature matching its preloaded target set. One shot, one target, no ambiguity. Weather was a factor. March in Zaporizhia means fog, low clouds, and unpredictable wind. The mission required clear enough conditions for the bait aircraft to be detected by radar. Heavy cloud cover might attenuate the return signal and fail to trigger the 92N6 activation. Meteorological analysis indicated a window opening on March 27th. Partial cloud cover at 4,000 meters. Surface visibility adequate. Winds at altitude manageable. The mission launched at 5:14 a.m. Both aircraft departed from separate airfields to avoid presenting a consolidated target for Russian surveillance. Communications were minimal. pre-coordinated timing meant both pilots knew exactly when and where to be, without extensive radio chatter that Russian signals intelligence could intercept. The bait pilot approached from the northwest, following a river valley that provided natural terrain masking for the first 90 kilometers of the ingress. At 5:38 a.m., precisely on schedule, the bait aircraft initiated a climb from 300 feet above ground level to 3,000 feet. A brief, deliberate exposure, like a hand waving above a trench line. The 91N6 acquisition radar detected the contact immediately. Ukrainian signals intelligence, monitoring from a ground station 60 kilometers to the rear, intercepted the radar's tracking pulse. The S-400 system had taken the bait. 14 seconds later, the 92N6 engagement radar activated. That activation was the death sentence for the entire battalion. The shooter, 85 kilometers to the south and flying at 200 feet above terrain, received the signal on his AN/ALR-69A radar warning receiver. The 92N6's X-band emissions were unmistakable, a sharp, high PRF pulse that the HARM missile's seeker head was specifically programmed to recognize. 5:41 a.m. The pilot pulled back on the stick. The F-16 climbed from 200 feet to approximately 1,500 feet in 6 seconds. The HARM seeker confirmed acquisition. A solid tone in the pilot's headset. Lock. He pressed the pickle button. The AGM-88 HARM dropped from the wing pylon, its solid rocket motor igniting instantly. The missile accelerated to Mach 2 within 4 seconds, climbing on a lofted trajectory that would carry it to maximum range before diving on the source of the radar emissions. The pilot pushed the nose down immediately, back below 300 feet, back behind the terrain mask. Total time exposed above 500 feet, 18 seconds. Now it was the missile's fight. The AGM-88 HARM is not a new weapon. The original variant entered service in 1985. But the version Ukraine received, the AGM-88B, with modifications for F-16 integration, remains devastatingly effective against ground-based radars. The missile weighs approximately 800 pounds, carries a 146-pound blast fragmentation warhead optimized for destroying antenna arrays and electronic equipment, and homes on its target with a passive seeker that requires 0 updates from the launching aircraft after release. Fire and forget. Literally, the flight time from launch to impact at this range was approximately 70 seconds. 70 seconds during which the S-400 crew had exactly one chance to survive. Shut down the 92N6 radar and displace. They didn't. The reason they didn't is a matter of tactical doctrine and human psychology. The 92N6 operator had just achieved lock on what he believed was a genuine penetration attempt by a Ukrainian fighter. His screens showed the bait aircraft descending, possibly attempting to escape. Standard procedure was to maintain track and, if ordered, launch an interceptor to destroy the target. Shutting down the radar at that moment meant losing the track. It meant letting a Ukrainian jet escape. It meant the battalion commander would demand an explanation. So, the radar stayed on. At 5:42 a.m. and approximately 11 seconds, the AGM-88 HARM struck the 92N6 engagement radar. The warhead detonated 6 feet above the antenna array, showering the entire system with tungsten fragments traveling at over 5,000 feet per second. The antenna, a phased array panel roughly 4 meters wide, was shredded. The radar van behind it absorbed fragments through its unarmored sides. The operators inside were subjected to overpressure and fragmentation simultaneously. But the destruction didn't stop with the 92N6. Russian S-400 battalions deploy in a characteristic pattern. The engagement radar sits centrally, with transporter erector launchers, the TELs carrying the actual interceptor missiles, positioned within 200 to 500 meters for cable connectivity. The command post vehicle is typically within 300 meters. The HARM's impact on the 92N6 triggered a fire. Diesel fuel from the radar van's generator ignited. The fire spread across the ground, reaching a TEL positioned approximately 150 meters to the east within 4 minutes. The TEL was loaded with 4 4.8N6 interceptor missiles, each containing a 143-pound blast fragmentation warhead and a solid fuel rocket motor. How many vehicles did this strike ultimately destroy? A. 2. B. 4. C. 6. The answer comes at the end. The first TEL detonated at approximately 5:47 a.m. The explosion was catastrophic. 4 interceptor missiles cooking off in sequence, their rocket motors igniting and sending burning propellant in every direction. The blast radius engulfed a second TL 200 meters to the south. This TEL had been in the process of emergency shutdown, its crew attempting to lower the launcher rails and prepare for displacement. They were too slow. The second TL detonated at 5:49 a.m., 8 missiles total now cooking off, creating a column of fire and smoke visible from over 30 kilometers away. Ukrainian drone operators monitoring the area captured the secondary explosions on camera. The footage, later released by Ukrainian Air Force Command, showed a series of massive fireballs erupting from a tree line, followed by thick black smoke that rose thousands of feet into the morning sky. The command post vehicle, a mobile coordination center containing the battalion's communications equipment, tactical displays, and command staff, was consumed by the spreading fire at approximately 5:52 a.m. Personnel who survived the initial blasts attempted to flee on foot. Ukrainian signals intelligence intercepted frantic radio transmissions from surviving crew members calling for evacuation and medical support. One transmission, later made public by Ukrainian military intelligence, captured a voice screaming in Russian, "The battery is gone. Everything is burning. We need evacuation now." Subscribe to Ukraine Signal if you want to understand how modern warfare actually works. Because what happened next, the exploitation of this strike, is where the real tactical brilliance begins. The S-400 battalion designated target Karpaty was destroyed. 192 N6 engagement radar, 2 48 N6 transporter erector launchers with a total of 8 interceptor missiles, 1 command post vehicle. Total estimated value of destroyed equipment, between $400 million and $550 million, depending on which accounting method is applied to Russia's defense procurement system. But the equipment losses were secondary to the operational impact. When the S-400 went down, it tore a hole in Russia's air defense network across the southern Zaporizhia front. The S-400's threat envelope had previously covered a radius of approximately 150 kilometers for fighter-sized targets. Every Ukrainian aircraft, every medium-altitude drone, every helicopter operating within that radius had been forced to fly at treetop level or risk destruction. The S-400 was the anchor of the entire southern air defense architecture. Shorter-range systems, Buk M3, Tor M2, Pantsir S1 provided point defense, but the S-400 provided the umbrella, the area denial, the psychological deterrent that kept Ukrainian aviation cautious. At 5:52 a.m. on March 27th, that umbrella collapsed. Ukrainian Air Force Command had anticipated this. The F-16 strike was not an isolated action. It was the first phase of a coordinated operation. Phase 2 began within minutes. At 6:08 a.m., the first wave of Ukrainian FPV drones launched from concealed positions near Orikhiv. These were not reconnaissance drones. These were attack platforms, small, fast, expendable quadcopters carrying shape-charged warheads capable of penetrating the top armor of any Russian vehicle in the theater. Each drone cost approximately $500. Each was guided by an operator using a first-person view headset, flying the drone manually to its target with precision measured in centimeters. Without the S-400's threat umbrella, the drones could operate at altitudes and ranges that had previously been suicidal. Medium altitude, 300 to 500 meters, gave operators better visibility, longer range on their video links, and more time to identify and select targets. For the first time in months, Ukrainian drone units over southern Zaporizhia could fly without constantly watching for the flash of an S-400 interceptor launch. They made it count. The first target set was a Russian mechanized infantry position 8 kilometers northeast of Robotyne. The position had been identified weeks earlier by Ukrainian reconnaissance, but its proximity to the S-400's coverage had prevented sustained drone operations against it. The position included a reinforced platoon with 3 BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles, a T-72B3 main battle tank in a hold-down position, and approximately 40 infantry in connected trench systems. At 6:14 a.m., the first FPV drone struck the T-72B3. The drone operator approached from directly above, a vertical dive that exploits the weakest armor on any tank, the roof of the turret. The shaped charge penetrated cleanly, Ammunition stored in the autoloader detonated. The turret separated from the hull and flew approximately 15 meters, landing inverted in an adjacent field. The phenomenon Russian tank crews call the jack-in-the-box effect. Western analysts call it catastrophic crew kill. Over the next 3 hours, Ukrainian drone units conducted over 40 individual FPV attack sorties against Russian positions along a 12-kilometer front. Without the S-400's protective umbrella, Russian short-range air defenses, Tor M2 and Panzer S-1 systems were overwhelmed. These systems are designed to protect specific point targets, not to provide area coverage. They can engage drones, but only within their limited detection and tracking envelopes. With dozens of small, low-flying drones approaching from multiple directions, the short-range systems couldn't keep up. If you believe tactics win wars, type Ukraine signal in the comments. Because what we're describing here isn't luck. This is systematic exploitation of a created vulnerability. The results were devastating for Russian forces along the Robotyne axis. Ukrainian General Staff reports released on March 28th confirmed the destruction of 14 Russian vehicles during the 11-hour window of degraded air defense coverage. These included 3 T-72 B-3 tanks, 4 BMP-2 infantry fighting vehicles, 2 Ural 4320 logistics trucks carrying ammunition, 2 S-19 MSTAS self-propelled howitzers caught in firing positions, 1 Buk M3 medium-range air defense launcher, 1 command and communications vehicle, and 1 TOS-1A thermobaric rocket launcher, a weapon specifically designed to incinerate defensive positions and one of the most feared systems on the battlefield. The TOS-1A kill was particularly significant. The system had been shelling Ukrainian positions near Robotyne for weeks, launching thermobaric rockets that create devastating overpressure effects in enclosed spaces like trenches and bunkers. Ukrainian forces had been unable to locate and destroy it because the TOS-1A operated under the S-400's protective umbrella, repositioning between volleys under the guarantee that Ukrainian aircraft and medium-altitude drones couldn't reach it. With the S-400 gone, a Ukrainian reconnaissance drone operating at 400 meters altitude spotted the TOS-1A during a displacement movement at 9:23 a.m. The system was caught in the open, its launcher rails still elevated from a recent firing. An FPV drone was redirected from another mission. 3 minutes later, the TOS-1A was burning, its 24 thermobaric rockets cooking off in a series of explosions that cratered the road beneath it. Total estimated Russian equipment losses during the 11-hour exploitation window, including the S-400 battalion itself, exceeded $600 million. Personnel casualties were estimated by Ukrainian intelligence at between 60 and 85 across all engagements, including the S-400 crew. Ukrainian losses during the same period: 2 FPV drones lost to electronic warfare jamming, 0 personnel casualties in the drone units. The 2 F-16s returned safely to their bases without damage. The asymmetry is staggering. A $300,000 HARM missile, the approximate unit cost of the AGM-88B, destroyed over $400 million in air defense equipment. The subsequent drone exploitation, using drones costing roughly $500 each, destroyed an additional $200 million in vehicles and weapon systems. For the Russian military command, the loss was more than material. It was doctrinal. The S-400 Triumph is not just another weapon system in Russia's inventory. It is the cornerstone of Russian air defense strategy, the system Russia sells to Turkey, India, and China as proof of its technological superiority. The system Russian state media has described as invincible, the system that was supposed to guarantee Russian dominance over Ukrainian airspace, and a single F-16, a 1970s design airframe flying with a 1980s-era anti-radiation missile, destroyed it in 18 seconds of exposure time. Intercepted Russian military communications in the hours following the strike revealed panic at multiple command levels. A Russian brigade commander demanding to know why the S-400 battalion had not displaced before the strike. A logistics officer reporting that replacement 9-2 N6 radar systems would take months to deliver from Russian production facilities. A staff officer acknowledging that air defense coverage across the southern Zaporizhia front would be critically degraded for the foreseeable future. The Russian Ministry of Defense did not publicly acknowledge the loss. Russian military bloggers, however, reported the strike within hours, some expressing frustration that the S-400 had been deployed in a position where it was vulnerable to exactly this type of attack. And that frustration points to a deeper problem for Russia. The S-400's vulnerability was not a hardware failure. The radar worked exactly as designed. The missiles were loaded and ready. The crew followed standard operating procedure. The problem was conceptual. The S-400 was designed for a battlefield where the enemy does not possess anti-radiation missiles capable of exploiting its emissions. It was designed for a world where Russia controls the electromagnetic spectrum. Ukraine, equipped with Western-supplied HARM missiles and F-16 fighters, shattered that assumption. What would NATO have done differently in this engagement? Comment your analysis below. The tactical lessons from March 27th are already reshaping how both sides fight. For Ukraine, the strike validated a concept that Air Force planners had been developing since F-16 deliveries began, using the HARM missile not as a suppression weapon, its traditional NATO role, forcing enemy radars to shut down temporarily, but as a destruction weapon, a one-shot elimination of high-value air defense nodes. The difference matters. Suppression is temporary. Destruction is permanent. An S-400 that shuts down its radar to avoid a harm can power up again in minutes. An S-400, whose radar has been physically destroyed by a HARM warhead, is gone forever. The key enabler was intelligence. Weeks of signals monitoring mapped the S-400's operating patterns, identified its position with sufficient accuracy to plan an approach route, and determined the specific radar frequencies the HARM needed to target. Without that intelligence preparation, the strike would not have been possible. The HARM missile is only as effective as the intelligence that guides the aircraft to the right place at the right time. Ukrainian Air Force Command confirmed on March 29th that the engagement represented the first verified destruction of an S-400 Triumph system by an F-16 in combat, anywhere in the world. No other Air Force has achieved this. The significance extends far beyond Ukraine. Every nation that operates the S-400, Russia, China, Turkey, India, is now recalculating the system's survivability against an adversary equipped with anti-radiation missiles and the intelligence to use them. For Russia, the lesson is harsher. The S-400 battalion near Robotyne was deployed according to standard doctrine, positioned behind the front line, radars cycling on and off, TELs loaded and ready, everything by the book. And the book got them destroyed. The vulnerability is structural. To function as an air defense system, the S-400 must emit radar energy. That emission is detectable. Detectable emissions can be targeted. Targeted radars can be destroyed. The only countermeasure is to not emit, which means the S-400 provides no air defense coverage. The system is caught in a paradox: operate and risk destruction, or stay silent and be useless. Russian forces attempted to address this vulnerability in the days following the strike. Satellite imagery analyzed by OSINT investigators showed surviving S-300 systems being repositioned to partially fill the coverage gap. Additional Buk M3 launchers were moved forward. Electronic warfare units deployed jamming systems intended to degrade HARM missile seekers, but these are stopgap measures. The S-300's radar is just as vulnerable to HARM missiles as the S-400's. Buk M3 systems lack the range and altitude coverage to replace a destroyed S-400 battalion. And electronic warfare jamming, while potentially effective against older HARM variants, is less reliable against missiles pre-programmed with specific frequency data. The air defense gap over southern Zaporizhia persisted for 11 hours on March 27th. Russian sources acknowledged it took nearly 2 weeks to restore comparable coverage to the area. And even then, the replacement consisted of older systems with shorter range and less capability. During those 2 weeks, Ukrainian drone operations along the Robotyne axis intensified dramatically. Without the S-400's umbrella, Ukrainian units operated with a freedom they hadn't experienced in months. Additional Russian vehicle losses during this period have not been fully tallied, but Ukrainian General Staff reports indicate sustained attrition of Russian mechanized assets throughout late March and early April 2026. Now, the answer to our earlier question: how many vehicles did this strike ultimately destroy? The answer is B, 4. The HARM strike directly destroyed 4 vehicles belonging to the S-400 battalion, 1 92N, 6 engagement radar, 2 TELs, and 1 command post vehicle. The additional 14 vehicles destroyed during the exploitation phase were indirect results of the air defense gap, not direct results of the harm impact itself. The distinction matters because it illustrates the cascading effect of destroying a high-value node in an integrated air defense network. 1 missile, 4 direct kills. But the removal of the S-400's coverage umbrella enabled the destruction of an additional 14 vehicles and an estimated 60 to 85 personnel casualties over the following hours. The total strategic damage from a single $300,000 missile exceeds $600 million, a return on investment that no other weapon system in this war can match. This is what modern warfare looks like. Not massed armored assaults, not 1,000-bomber raids. A single pilot flying alone at 200 feet, armed with a weapon designed to exploit the fundamental physics of radar detection. 19 seconds of exposure, 1 missile launch, and an entire battalion-level air defense system, the pride of Russia's military-industrial complex, burning in a field in Zaporizhzhia Oblast. Ukraine doesn't just use weapons. Ukraine invents new ways to fight. The F-16 pilots who executed this mission remain anonymous. Ukrainian operational security ensures their identities are protected. But within the Ukrainian Air Force, their achievement is already legendary. The first F-16 crew to destroy an S-400 in combat. The first pilots anywhere in the world to prove that Russia's most advanced air defense system can be hunted and destroyed by a single fighter aircraft carrying a weapon older than most of the soldiers fighting this war. So 3 questions remain. Was the decision to use an F-16 with a HARM missile rather than HIMARS or Storm Shadow the right tactical choice? The results suggest yes. But what if the HARM had missed? What if the 9-2N6 had shut down in time? Could Russia have prevented this strike? The intelligence preparation took weeks. The approach route was carefully planned. Russian signal security was inadequate. Could better emission control discipline have saved the battalion? And finally, what would you have done differently? If you were the Ukrainian air commander, would you have risked 2 F-16 that among the most valuable assets in the entire Ukrainian inventory on a single strike against an S-400? Or would you have waited for a safer opportunity that might never come? Real tactics. Real consequences. Ukraine Signal. Subscribe to Ukraine Signal because we break down the battles that textbooks will study for decades. This is the war that is rewriting every assumption about air defense, about radar survivability, about the balance between offense and defense in modern combat. And it's happening right now. The fields near Robotyne are quiet today. Farmers will eventually return to this land. But for now, the burned-out hulks of 2 transporter erector launchers sit in a blackened clearing, their missile rails twisted by heat, their purpose ended forever. Beside them, the scorched remains of a 9-2N6 radar van, the antenna array that once tracked everything within 150 kilometers reduced to shredded metal. Silent reminders that modern warfare punishes tactical mistakes without mercy. Stay vigilant.